Welcome to Nightmare Coming, where folklore meets cold reality and the stories whispered in the dark unfold in ways you never expected. One nightmare at a time, one hidden layer at a time. If they left it unexplained, we'll dare to look closer. If you've ever wondered whether these campfire tales were just harmless bedtime stories, prepare yourself. This time, you may never hear the word monster or the sound of your own footsteps the same way again. So before you lean back, take a moment to like the video and subscribe. If you truly want to keep questioning, keep seeking, and leave a comment with the first scary story you ever heard. I'd love to see what still follows you. You whisper a name, and the room changes temperature. That's the first thing you notice, the way sound thickens when you dare to speak certain words aloud. Satan. Simple, just 2 syllables. But even your tongue seems to hesitate, dragging over the teeth, as though it knows the weight of what it's trying to carry. You've heard the name all your life. Cartoons drawing him as a red fool with horns, pulpits warning you about eternal fire, friends daring each other to scribble pentagrams on the desk. The name is familiar, overused, even mocked. And yet, beneath the carnival mask, something ancient stirs. You feel it the way you feel eyes in the dark. Because the truth is, every name ever given to Satan carries a history far older than Sunday school rhymes. Lucifer, the light bringer, dripping with irony. Beelzebub, the lord of flies, buzzing at the edge of plague. The adversary, not just a foe, but the one role the universe needed to keep everything balanced. Each title is not just a word, it's a fragment of a story told in languages half buried, in rituals performed before alphabets were carved. You think it's just vocabulary, but it's more like keys jangling, each one opening a door you may not want to walk through. You've seen the horror trope before, the Ouija board spelling out a name letter by letter. That's no accident. Folklore clings to the idea that names are more than labels, they're invitations. Speak a demon's name, and you're dialing its number. Whisper Satan's name at midnight in a broken-down church, and who answers? Maybe nothing, or maybe a flicker of shadow behind the pulpit that shouldn't be there. Psychologists argue whether saying forbidden names is a way of confronting fear, of pushing boundaries safely. Yet ask the folklore keepers, and they'll tell you that words build bridges. Bridges you can't always burn down after crossing. But here's where it becomes trickier. Satan doesn't just own one name. He wears masks of language, tone, and culture. To the ancient Hebrews, he was Hey Satan, the accuser, a courtroom figure with sharp questions. To early Christians, he mutated into a fallen angel with wings blackened by pride. To later storytellers, he was the trickster, the bargainer, the sly grin in the alleyway. Each culture, without consulting the others, conjured a figure disturbingly familiar, a shadow that twists truth into a blade. Isn't it strange how they all settled on the same shape? Irony sneaks in here. You might laugh at kids daring each other to chant Bloody Mary into a mirror, yet avoid saying Satan when you're alone. Harmless game, right? Still, you feel a pull to glance at the doorway, just to be sure. You don't fear the silly nickname, but the oldest name, it tastes different in the mouth. It sticks, like ash. And then there's the unsettling variation, the idea that the real power of Satan's names isn't in summoning him, but in disguising him. Think of how many villains in stories go unnamed, hidden behind titles that sound almost noble. The morning star once sounded divine. Lightbringer suggested hope, until suddenly the name meant betrayal, fall, and ruin. Could it be that the names were never warnings but disguises? That when you use them casually, you don't repel the shadow, you normalize it. Every joke, every Halloween mask, every parody is just another layer of camouflage, another step in making the name harmless, so that when you finally hear it in its true weight, you won't recognize the danger. You can't ignore the callbacks either. That flickering light in the hallway you saw last night, the one you dismissed as a bad bulb. Folklore would tell you otherwise. They'd whisper that shadows like to answer quietly when their names are called, not with fire and thunder, but with subtle malfunctions. Your phone buzzing at midnight with no notification, the hallway light twitching when the room goes still. He answers not in the spectacular, but in the unnoticed. Isn't that the cleverest trick? 3 ironic truths linger as you listen. First, people fear saying Voldemort in a children's book more than they fear whispering Satan in real life. Second, the same culture that censors curse words will print Satan's name on Halloween candy bags. Third, you probably think you're safe because you don't believe in him, but belief doesn't silence a name. So when you murmur Satan tonight, the syllables hanging like smoke in your room, what exactly do you invite? An echo of human fear? A cultural shadow you've inherited? Or something leaning just behind you, smiling at the sound of its name, waiting for you to say it again, louder, braver, unknowing? You know the story, or at least you think you do. The angel who would not kneel. That's the line you've heard whispered from pulpits and movies alike. Lucifer, clothed in light, asked to bow to something less radiant than himself, humanity, fragile and breakable. And he refused. Simple pride, they told you. Simple arrogance. But you feel there's something more to it, don't you? Something that echoes in your chest every time you mutter, "I will not bend." Imagine it. The highest choir of heaven, the sky blistering with voices so loud they splinter stone, every angel dropping into worship except one. The silence around him was deafening. You walk among the crowd of glowing figures, and you see him standing still, unmoved, the sharp line of his jaw set like iron. In that stillness, you understand. The refusal wasn't just rebellion, it was a mirror. He saw himself, and for the first time, the reflection was more intoxicating than the light he was meant to serve. Horror stories love this moment. The fallen one is always cast as tragic, a villain whose pride outweighs his duty. But look closer at the variation buried beneath centuries of retelling. What if the refusal was not simply about arrogance, but about loyalty to something truer? Folklore in certain corners whispers that Lucifer wasn't rejecting God. He was rejecting the plan to kneel before humanity, to bow before you. That changes everything, doesn't it? The hatred you sense in the dark, the whispers that needle at your insecurities. Those could be remnants of a first grudge not against heaven, but against you, personally. Urban legend bleeds into this. Think of the trope of the teacher betrayed by the student, the once loyal protector who suddenly turns. You've seen it in horror films. The guardian angel who becomes the stalker, the mentor who resents the very existence of the protege. It's chilling because it cuts close to reality. How many people have you known who celebrated you at first, only to grow bitter when you rose higher than they could tolerate? Lucifer's refusal is just the most cosmic version of that. And the irony? We call him the proud one. But isn't pride exactly what fuels human ambition? The skyscrapers piercing the skyline, the inventions that defy gravity, the endless wars launched because someone couldn't stand to be second place. All of it echoes that single act. You point fingers at him for falling, but every time you boast, every time you choose yourself first, you reenact the same drama in miniature. If pride makes the angel fall, then what's it doing to you? Psychologists debate this endlessly. Was Lucifer's story crafted to teach humility or to mirror an unspoken truth about human desire? Do you follow rules out of faith or out of fear of consequence? And if the only thing separating you from the fallen is a cosmic boundary, you've heard the phrase too many times, selling your soul to the devil. It sounds theatrical, doesn't it? Something scribbled in Gothic novels, shouted in rock lyrics, acted out under red stage lights. You roll your eyes at it, the way you'd scoff at teenagers daring each other with a Ouija board. But behind the cliche lies a strange, stubborn truth. Across centuries, across continents, stories repeat the same scene. A desperate human, a shadowed figure, a bargain signed in silence. Imagine you at a crossroads, the night air still, too still, as if the insects themselves are holding their breath. You dig into your pocket, clutching the object of your offering. Sometimes a lock of hair, sometimes a drop of blood, sometimes nothing more than your whispered plea. The silence thickens, and then he is there. No fiery entrance, no grand spectacle. Just a presence so heavy you feel the ground sink beneath you. You try to speak, but your tongue feels clumsy, and yet somehow the contract writes itself without a pen. You wanted music, fame, love, revenge. It doesn't matter. You offered, he accepted. Deal sealed. No sound, no witnesses, only silence. The horror trope here is obvious. The deal with the devil. You've seen it in Faust, in campfire stories about blues musicians meeting strangers at midnight, in countless horror films where characters trade their safety for desire. Always the same pattern. The promise too tempting, the cost too high, the ending inevitable. But what unsettles you is the variation, the idea that the deal doesn't require words, doesn't even require your conscious agreement. Folklore hints that bargains can be struck by thought. Your whispered resentment at someone else's success, your desperate midnight wish that you'd do anything to escape your life, those might be enough. And when opportunity comes knocking too perfectly the next day, how sure are you that you didn't already sign something? Think about Robert Johnson, the bluesman who supposedly met Satan at the crossroads. He walked away with talent beyond comprehension and died mysteriously at 27. You tell yourself it's just myth, but look at the eerie repetition. So many artists, so many geniuses, gone young after sudden, unexplainable bursts of brilliance. Psychologists argue whether this is just self-destruction born of genius or a cultural story we project onto tragedy. Yet, doesn't it trouble you that the pattern fits too neatly? That we can chart the bargains like constellations, each star a soul that burned too fast, too bright? And irony stalks you here. First, people scoff at the idea of selling souls, yet line up daily to sell their privacy, their time, their freedom, for smaller rewards than music or power. Second, we condemn the mythical bargain, yet idolize those who supposedly made it, wearing their faces on t-shirts, humming their songs. Third, you shake your head at old folklore, even as you mutter, "I'd give anything," not realizing how old those words are, how often they've been answered. The silence of the bargain is what unsettles you most. You expect horns, thunder, ink burning into parchment. Instead, folklore says, it happens in the pause between heartbeats. You wanted, you offered, you received, and you don't remember when it happened. The next time you stand in your room and feel that flickering light above you, think of it less as faulty wiring and more as acknowledgement, contract received, signed in silence. The question that lingers, of course, is whether these bargains are traps or mirrors. Is Satan luring you with bait, or merely reflecting the deal you already wanted? When you whisper that you'd give anything to fix your loneliness, isn't that already a contract? Maybe the devil doesn't coerce. Maybe he just listens better than anyone else. So tonight, when you close your eyes and think, I'd do anything if, ask yourself, who is listening? Who is smiling at the sound of your unspoken words? And when you wake tomorrow to find a door opened, a problem solved, a dream closer, will you still believe no one heard? The bargain is never the end of the story. It's only the overture. Every deal needs a stage, a setting that echoes with anticipation before the curtain rises. And Satan, if you believe the old whispers, has his favorite stages. Not churches, not dungeons, but the places you already know. Places humming with music, with desperation, with electricity so thick in the air you can almost taste copper on your tongue. Picture this, a dirt road stretching out under a starless sky, the crossroads at its center carved into the earth like a scar. You stand there, the ground oddly warmer at the intersection. People have gathered here for centuries, drawn by something they can't explain. Legends say if you wait long enough, you'll feel a shadow slip behind you, hear a rustle of wings without feathers, smell sulfur hidden beneath the night's damp air. The crossroads is a classic horror trope, liminal space, neither here nor there, a threshold where rules thin. But here's the unsettling variation. The stage doesn't have to be a dusty road. Any place pulsing with human desire can become one. A concert hall with its screaming fans. A boardroom where someone whispers, I'd give anything to win this deal. Even your own bedroom at 3:15 a.m. when your chest is heavy and you feel like someone else is sitting on your ribcage, waiting for your silence to turn into agreement. Urban legends pile on top of each other. The bluesman's deal at midnight. The rock star who confessed in interviews about his dark inspiration. The small town story of a farmer who suddenly gained wealth after burying something at the crossroads, only for his descendants to fall one by one into ruin. These tales aren't random. They repeat because they feed into the same dread. That success beyond measure comes only from stages where the spotlight isn't just on you. Something else is always watching, applauding in the shadows. And think of the irony. First, the very stages where people gather for joy, music, theater, even a wedding altar, are the places folklore says bargains echo loudest. Second, we design elaborate stages to celebrate ourselves, never noticing how neatly they double as traps for whispers we can't quite hear. Third, you probably think Satan prefers the grotesque and the macabre, but his favorite stage is the one you find beautiful, irresistible. Psychologists debate the phenomenon of thin places, locations where humans report feeling closer to something beyond themselves. Cathedrals with ceilings that feel infinite. Forest clearings where time bends strangely. And yes, concert arenas where a crowd becomes one organism, roaring, swaying, surrendering. Science calls it collective effervescence. Folklore calls it the devil's stage. Which name feels more honest to you? Remember that flickering light in the hallway? Imagine it now not as a glitch, but as a cue. The stage light warming up before the scene begins. You walk past, ignoring it. But maybe you've already stepped into the performance without realizing you're an actor. The contracts you don't remember signing, the whispers you don't recall agreeing to, those are simply rehearsals for the play you've already joined. And what of the audience? Horror stories often remind you that the devil doesn't need to appear center stage. He's content to sit in the crowd, watching. At a funeral where grief spills into fury. At a wedding where Every culture tells itself the same story, only in different costumes. You think Satan is a Western invention, born from church pulpits and medieval woodcuts. But pause for a moment. Strip away the horns, the pitchfork, the fire, and look closely. The mask changes, but the face beneath stays familiar. It is the adversary, the tempter, the shadow figure stepping across borders without ever needing a passport. You wander through history like a dimly lit museum. In Mesopotamia, they whispered of Pazuzu, demon of the southwest wind, spreading famine and plague. In Zoroastrian Persia, there was Angra Mainyu, the destructive spirit always clawing at Ahura Mazda's creation. In Norse tales, Loki weaves mischief that tips over into ruin, smiling even as Ragnarok rises. Each story is separated by geography, by language, by centuries. But look how the threads weave into the same tapestry, an entity that mocks light, bends truth, corrupts what should be safe. The horror trope here is easy to spot, the many faces of the monster. You've seen it in movies where the villain wears different disguises, slipping from one role to another. One moment, a kind stranger. The next, the predator in the dark. But the unsettling variation is this. What if the disguises aren't disguises at all? What if these different devils across cultures aren't separate beings, but the same figure adjusting the mask to suit each audience? Isn't it chilling to think the whispers have only ever come from one throat, fluent in every tongue? Folklore is full of ironies, but here are three you can't ignore. First, societies that never met, never traded stories, still conjured the same adversary, almost as if they were describing a real presence. Second, people laugh at the devil's cartoonish Western image, not realizing the mask is designed to make them laugh. Third, the more we reduce him to myth, the freer he becomes to walk unnoticed in everyday life. Psychologists wrestle with the archetype theory, Carl Jung's idea that shadows like the devil are symbols bubbling from humanity's collective unconscious. That would mean Satan is just the shape we give to our darkest impulses. But then again, how do you explain the eerie similarities? Why does a Persian farmer and a Viking sailor describe the same presence watching from the edge of firelight? Coincidence or continuity? Think back to the flickering hallway light. Once you thought it a faulty bulb, then a smirk of rebellion, later a stage cue. Now perhaps it's a mask slipping for just an instant, letting you glimpse the same figure hiding across time. You shrug it off, but deep down, doesn't the recognition sting? You've heard his name in different languages, and yet the chill it sends down your spine is identical. The question that lingers is unsettling. If every culture shapes its own god, could it be that only one shadow has remained constant, smiling from the beginning? The devil as trickster, plague bringer, mocker, whatever version frightens you most. What's more terrifying? The idea that humanity invented the same monster again and again. or that the same monster has been following humanity, wearing masks, never leaving. So, when you dream tonight and hear a stranger whisper in a tongue you don't understand, don't be too quick to dismiss it. That tongue has been spoken in deserts, in forests, on ships tossed. You wear them without thinking, on t-shirts, in jewelry, stitched into sneakers, inked forever into skin. Symbols, signs, designs that you shrug off as fashion, as harmless expression. But you've felt the weight before. You've walked into a room, seen a shape carved into the wall, and felt your stomach knot, though you couldn't explain why. That's the unsettling truth about Satan's legacy. His fingerprints hide in plain sight, disguised as art, aesthetics, even good luck charms. Start with the pentagram. You see it in horror films, scrawled in blood or chalk, a glowing doorway for something unspeakable to crawl through. That's the cliche. But trace it back and you'll find it etched on amulets, thousands of years old, once used for protection, for summoning power, for keeping spirits at bay. How ironic, then, that the same star meant for safety is now painted as the devil's seal. Doesn't that twist feel deliberate, as though someone has been rewriting the meaning until you no longer know which side of the line you're standing on? The horror trope here is the cursed object. A doll, a mirror, a symbol that seems ordinary until it isn't. You've seen it in films where the character picks up something without hesitation, only for the lights to flicker, the whispers to begin. But here's the unsettling variation. The cursed object doesn't need to be ancient or dust-covered. It can be the logo on the band you idolize, the charm dangling from your wrist, even the emoji you casually type into your screen. Folklore suggests symbols don't lose their charge simply because you forget their history. The current still runs, even if you don't believe in electricity, and irony slides its knife 3 times. First, people fear saying Satan's name, but happily wear symbols that have been tied to him for centuries. Second, fashion calls it edgy or aesthetic, while folklore whispers that it's closer to initiation than decoration. Third, some of the most powerful religious icons themselves, crosses flipped, prayers inverted, become tools of mockery, their comfort twisted into a dare. Psychologists argue whether symbols are just cultural conditioning, shapes that spook us only because we've been told they should. Yet even skeptics admit there are images that trigger unease universally, spirals that make you dizzy, sigils that feel older than alphabets. Why should a 5-pointed star scratched on stone make your skin prickle if it's only geometry? And why do people who don't even share your religion still feel wrong when seeing it inverted, glowing, lit by candlelight? Remember the flickering hallway light? Consider it a symbol too, a mundane object that betrays something larger. Maybe it wasn't the bulb failing, but the shape of the shadow it cast, lines intersecting just enough to form an unintentional sign. Folklore says symbols don't just sit idly, they call, they echo. Every time you notice a shape repeating, in graffiti, in dreams, in random scrawls, you have to wonder, did you stumble across it, or did it stumble across you? The question gnaws at you. If symbols are invitations, how many have you already carried into your home? That band poster on your wall, that tattoo inked at midnight, that charm you bought at a flea market, what doorways have you unknowingly hung open? Faith is supposed to be armor. That's what they told you anyway. Prayer as shield, ritual as comfort, the sound of hymns carrying you into safety. But Satan has always favored mockery over brute force. He doesn't smash the cross from your hand. He twists it until it feels unfamiliar, fragile, almost laughable. And suddenly, what you once leaned on feels hollow, like wood rotting from the inside. Think of the horror trope, the possessed church. You've seen it. The once holy sanctuary turned uncanny. The hymnals that sound off-key. The crucifix that bleeds. The priest whose words come out backward. Terrifying, yes, but predictable. The unsettling variation is subtler. The mockery doesn't arrive as spectacle, but as doubt. You kneel to pray and realize your mind wanders to petty anger. You whisper a sacred phrase and hear yourself questioning whether the sound means anything at all. Folklore insists Satan's sharpest weapon isn't fire, but mimicry. He repeats your faith back to you like an echo, but always just distorted enough to unsettle. Consider irony's bite. First, the prayers you whisper at your weakest moments may be the very ones he enjoys twisting, replaying to you as silence. Second, the rituals meant to expel him, holy water, crosses, chants, are props he sometimes uses to mock their own power. Third, you assume mocking faith is his rebellion, when in truth, it may be his delight. After all, what better trophy than watching you laugh at the thing you once trusted most? Psychologists call it cognitive dissonance, the brain's discomfort when belief collides with doubt. They frame it clinically as if the unease is just neurons misfiring. But folklore answers differently. Doubt, it says, isn't just an internal struggle. It's a whisper offered to you. A gift. One you accept the moment you let the question linger without resolve. And haven't you felt it? That chill when you try to pray and your words stick, as if someone else is pressing a finger gently against your lips, smiling, savoring your silence. Remember the flickering hallway light. You thought it a glitch, then a smirk, then a stage cue, then a symbol. Now imagine it as a parody. The light blinks like a candle, imitating the sacred glow of altars, but here it's mocking, failing, teasing you with its sputter. Every comfort you cling to, Satan delights in bending until it resembles a joke. Even your own heartbeat can be made to sound like hollow laughter if you listen too long in the dark. And that's the most terrifying debate of all. Is Satan real, or is he simply the embodiment of your crumbling faith? Does he mock you from outside, or is he the shadow that appears the moment you realize you're not sure what you believe anymore? Psychologists shrug, folklore smirks. Both answers are equally cruel. So tonight, when you bow your head, whisper words you once trusted, and feel that sharp, dry silence press back at you. Don't be surprised if you hear a chuckle in it. Not loud, just faint enough to sound like your own breath betraying you. Hunger, that's the last fact. Not fire, not horns, not vengeance. Hunger, a presence that doesn't sleep, doesn't weaken, doesn't stop circling you. You imagine Satan as bargaining, mocking, tricking, but strip all the masks away and there it is, a constant, gnawing appetite. Not for blood or bodies. That's too crude. What he wants is subtler. He wants your notice, your surrender, the little pieces you don't realize you're handing over until you're hollow. The horror trope here is the devouring monster. You've seen it, the shapeless creature that eats everything, the vampire draining more than just blood, the endless abyss you can't fill. The unsettling variation, Satan doesn't have to devour you in one gulp. He only has to nibble. A little pride here, a little despair there. One bargain signed, one prayer mocked, one symbol ignored. Piece by piece until you mistake your emptiness for your own doing. Folklore insists that his hunger is endless because it's not for your body or your soul, but for your choices. Every time you choose shadow over light, the feast continues. Irony lingers like smoke. First, you fear possession, yet live each day possessed by desires that lead you exactly where he wants. Second, you imagine him raging for belief, when in truth, he doesn't need it. Your indifference feeds him just as well. Third, you think denying him makes you safe, but the more you laugh, the less you guard, and the easier it is for him to keep eating. Psychologists call it the neglect effect. People don't notice the gradual erosion of self when it happens slowly, like water carving stone, like termites hollowing wood. You think you're whole until you tap your chest and hear the hollowness echo. Isn't it strange that this clinical explanation sounds exactly like the old sermons about temptation? The hunger doesn't need you to collapse all at once. It needs you to ignore the slow unraveling and remember the flickering hallway light. You've been chasing it through the story, at first a glitch, then a smirk, then a stage cue, then a mask, then a parody. Now see it for what it really is, a reminder that hunger waits in pauses, in silences, in the ordinary. Each blink of the bulb, each pause in your heart's rhythm, each breath between prayers. It feeds in those gaps, not loud, not spectacular, patient. Here's the cruelest question. What if the scariest fact about Satan is not that he waits to drag you into fire, but that he doesn't need to? What if he only waits for you to keep living, keep forgetting, keep offering scraps of yourself without realizing what you're feeding? Belief or disbelief, reverence or mockery, it doesn't matter. The hunger doesn't discriminate. So when you feel the silence press heavy tonight, when you see that light stutter in the corner of your eye, ask yourself, how much of you has already been eaten? And how much is left before you notice the hollow echo inside your own chest? And so, the room grows quieter, as if even the shadows have leaned in to listen. You've walked with me through every whispered fact, every ironic twist, every light that flickered when it shouldn't have. 7 truths, each colder than the last, and yet none of them needed fire or brimstone to frighten you. Only the weight of noticing too late. You see, the most unnerving stories aren't the ones that scream. They're the ones that whisper. They lean close, breathe steady, and remind you that evil doesn't always crash through doors. It waits at the corners, nudges your choices, lingers in symbols you thought were harmless. It doesn't demand your devotion. It only thrives on your neglect. Slowly now, almost kindly, let that settle in your chest. Feel how the thought lingers, how the questions keep circling even after the tale is told. Did you remember every bargain? Did you notice every mask? Did you hear the silence when the hunger pressed close? And here's the softest truth. Even if you never believe in Satan, you'll still carry the echo of these 7 facts into your dreams tonight. Because belief isn't the key, attention is. And now that you've paid it, now that you've leaned in with me, the story has done its work. So close your eyes, breathe slowly, pretend the shadows are still where they belong. Pretend the hunger isn't watching from just beyond the frame. And if you hear that flicker, that tiny buzz of the light in the hallway, don't rush to turn your head. Some truths are better left unconfirmed. Rest now. The night is long, and the story stays.